I received a question yesterday about travel times in Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars. Now, this is one of those things in Star Wars that I think it's pretty justified to feel some confusion about. After all, in the films, we don't really get much indication at all about how long it takes to get anywhere. And in all the other Star Wars material out there, everybody who's creating it is operating from the same basis. So there may be some confusion or discussion or contradiction, that kind of thing. But in the game, it's actually not that bad. There's just two short sections, one containing how to determine how long a trip is going to take, and then another section which delves more deeply into why a trip might take more or less time, or be more or less dangerous, or the like. So part of it feeds into your narrative description of travel, and the other part is just for the game master to figure out how a thing should be done. So this video is going to cover the topic of travel, both Sublight and Hyperspace, in Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars. Let's start with Sublight travel, because that's the briefest section. Now, where am I getting this information? This is coming from Chapter 7, Starships and Vehicles. This is the Sublight Travel subsection, which in Edge of the Empire is on page 246. It's on a different page in the other two books, but it's the same section. I'll post where it is here. Okay, table 7-12 is the Sublight travel times table, and it gives ranges of times. But really, everything boils down to just one sentence for this. And that sentence comes just before the table appears. And that sentence is, ultimately, the game master should remember that the exact length of any trip at sublight speeds is left up to their discretion, and such movement happens, essentially, at whatever speed the plot requires. And you can see this definitely represented in the films, which is ultimately what it is that we're trying to emulate in the games. So now this might drive some players crazy. They want a very specific time, because after all, this is a spaceship traveling under thrust through the vastness of space, and so therefore it should be able to. But this is where genre expectation collides with real world expectation. And Star Wars is not the real world. Star Wars is first and foremost a particular expression of a type of fiction. And so, where do you fall on this line? If you can handle playing through screen wipes and we're there, go for it. If you need a little bit more structure, then you've got table 7-12, Sublight travel times, which explains in matters of minutes and hours how long it takes to go from wherever you started on a planet into orbit to a safe jump distance from that body, or from the center of a solar system to its outer edge. But these are flexible times because no two systems are created the same, and no two systems have the same kind of stellar terrain, right? So there are different things which might impact upon your travel times, not the least of which is the Empire floating around and making trouble for people. And that's it. Sublight travel, basically at its heart, takes as much time as it needs, or takes as little time as it needs, in order for things to be fun and interesting. But there are some guidelines provided in a handy table. Okay. Interstellar travel requires hyperspace, and going through hyperspace is governed by a lot of things, but most importantly is the hyperspace modifier. The engine itself will determine how quickly any given ship can move through hyperspace. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but what that is determined by is the modifier. Now, in this particular game, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, there's an awful lot of ships that are given the ×1 multiplier, which means the travel times are the travel times. And there's another chart for them. In older editions, that ×1 multiplier was less common. And so it was something to work toward. So if there's any part of the game that I've ever been tempted to house rule or adjust, it really has been this, the number of ships that come with a ×1 hyperspace multiplier. I prefer that, only the newest, best, most well-maintained, or let's say Imperial ships carry those, or, smugglers on certain named and known ships, but that's neither here nor there. The multiplier will affect the chart, and the chart's on the next page. So we've got table 7-13 and 7-14, and these two things work together with your narrative of the particular situation and conditions at the time to determine how long any given hyperspace trip will be. So 7-13 is the astrogation modifiers. How well did you plot your course? So when Han Solo talks about the Kessel Run, he's talking about having plotted an excellent course, therefore reducing travel time. And table 7-14, hyperspace travel times, gives us a general overview of how long it should take to take care of this. So, how long is that? Well, let's look at the astrogation modifiers first. What's the situation, and how are the hyperspace calculations being done in the first place? Right? You're going to need a Navicomputer to do the bulk of the calculations, and then these have to be verified. Who's doing the verification? How skilled are they? That's the astrogation check. So if everything's perfect, the Navicomputer is fine, there's no stress going on, it's still not a simple check. It's an easy check, difficulty 1. And from that base difficulty of 1, we then can apply more modifiers as things get harder and harder. So for example, let's say you're in a very old ship. Let's say you've been hard on your luck for a while. Let's say your obligation levels are very high. Or let's say you're a very famous, recognizable rebel who having difficulty moving around in polite society. So therefore, let's say that your navigation charts are maybe last year's or the year before. You've got outdated navigation charts, or maybe you've had to rely on a less than reliable source for your navigation charts because you can't register the purchase with the Imperial Transportation Bureau or whatever it is, and so you're using old data and space is constantly in motion. So that adds one more difficulty die. Now the difficulty's up to 2. Well, let's say we also have some damage. Now the difficulty is up to 3 because we're adding +1 difficulty for each of these conditions. Let's say we're in a rush. Quick calculations, right? Well, things can stack up pretty quickly. And then, of course, there's always the influence of the destiny pool. And all of these things have an influence on how good the trip is. And how good the trip is can include how long or short it might be. Now, it can also mean that you've impacted with a planet, but that's the simple answer. And that's also the game master deciding that they're tired of you and it's time to end the campaign. You don't have to go there. In fact, you don't have to go where you wanted to go at all. Right? A bad astrogation check can do a variety of things, not just blow the ship into smithereens. That's one of the big fears. Getting lost, having no idea where you are, that's also pretty horrifying. Or having a trip drag on and on and on because it's not a smooth and direct line. It's roundabout, circuitous. And how many rations are aboard this ship anyway? Ultimately, Table 7-14, Hyperspace Travel Times, will be your guide in determining, at the very least, how long characters will think a trip is going to take. This will be their base understanding, and then the astrogation modifiers and other factors will determine if it's going to be longer or shorter. Now, these other factors we should talk about because these, again, are purely narrative. The Game Master is empowered by these rule sections to present the foundation of the situation. In other words, to frame the role in a particular way. There are reasons why this might take longer. There are reasons that connect to what the group is trying to do, what the current state of the galaxy might be, and so on and so forth. So this could be something simple, like the ruined planet of Alderaan, right? With all of its fragments spreading through its solar system, travel times have been affected, right, negatively. Some other celestial event might slow or render temporarily perilous a formerly safe route. But it could be something else. And often in the campaign that we have, the obligation levels run very high. The characters are constantly being sought. And so they have to use lesser known routes. And they have to make shorter trips, jumping here, checking it's okay, jumping there, right? Rarely ever do they calculate a long jump from one point to their destination, right? They travel these lesser known hyperlanes. Sometimes they've blazed their own at great personal risk, and so on and so forth. But all of these things impact on travel times. So if we're traveling within a sector, it says we can expect 10 to 24 hours. So up to a day of travel is normal inside a sector. That's your baseline. That's what people expect. Like, it takes about 2 hours to get there, right? Well, it takes about a day to get there is a normal expectation inside a sector. Inside a region could take as long as 72 hours. But it has the same base. Again, 10 to 72 hours. You could get there really quickly within a region. Between regions, 3 days to a week. And then crossing the galaxy, 1 to 3 weeks. So travel time is within a month. But these are direct travel times, and these are expectations of travel. Now imagine you have a ×2 hyperdrive multiplier. That 10 to 24 hours is now a day to 2 days. Within a region, we're getting close to a week, right? Between regions, it's over a month, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty easy to have lengthy travel times or that kind of convoy experience, but it's also pretty easy to say you arrive. And the correct answer about travel time is going to rest with your group. What will your group accept, and what will they enjoy as part of their Star Wars experience? Is travel going to be necessary, and specifically travel time going to be necessary to what it is that you're actually doing in this session? Well, you have this material to help you plan it out and support it, both in the fiction and in the mechanics, to satisfy everybody. If it's not relevant to what's going on, other than how many rations are left aboard the ship, or really how long did this take, from a curiosity perspective, then from a certain point of view, it took as long as it took. Let's finish this video off with some nitty-gritty, with something real, because some of that hand-wavy, from a certain point of view stuff can drive some players mad, and that's not what we're about. We're supposed to be doing this to have a good time. So, travel times. Ultimately, if you want to get someplace faster, that's going to be dependent on the astrogation check. So, if you want to have control over how you get someplace, or where you end up, or how quickly you get there, somebody in your crew needs to be able to handle complex astrogation. Your Navicomputer needs to be in good shape. Your charts need to be up to date. Even so, you must be prepared that conditions where you're going, where you are, or somewhere in between might have varied since that navigation material was prepared. It's a dangerous galaxy, and sometimes the Empire is not the good guy. So, the astrogation check. The astrogation check, as we discussed earlier in the video, very rapidly becomes more difficult. So, having the time to double check the calculations, having the time to be careful, plot a good, convenient, safe course, this is something that typically is not going to happen in a session. So we're looking at difficulties of 2 or higher. We're looking at conditions that spiral into challenge dice. All right, so if we have failures and threat possible, and if we have the possibility of despair looming, as we mentioned earlier, the temptation is to hit something. But why? Right. Why not have a course that requires dropping in and out of hyperspace multiple times, and in one of those drops back into normal space, somebody's waiting, or you interrupt something clandestine, right? Or you encounter terrain that has forced you out of hyperspace, and therefore now you must travel for another 10 to 24 hours to clear it, and so on and so forth. Things to slow you down, things to make you easy to catch by the Empire, things to get you, interacting with hostiles, or at least people who aren't your friends right now, this sort of stuff. Threats can be applied to time, condition, the condition of the ship, the depletion of stores, right? Despair. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do with despair. An argument could break out among the crew, even, causing someone to do something drastic, like turn the ship around. Who knows? There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. The galaxy is full and waiting for your imagination. So, travel times, ultimately, shouldn't be the thing that is causing no fun. It might be causing tension or stress. It might be causing the players to dig deep and marshal their resources. But what they're telling us for our genre expectation is that travel times shouldn't be a force in the experience at the table that makes something boring or make people feel like they can't do something. They definitely should worry that they can't get there in time. But if everything that they want to do is always too far away for them to be able to do it, then travel times are being mishandled to match those genre expectations. Now you're playing a different game in a different genre, and that's probably not what you signed up to do. All right, I hope this video has helped and it wasn't too long. I'll see you in the next one.